Planning for the new Arkansas K-12 science standards. What are the next generation science standards? The next generation science standards provide an important opportunity for states to improve not only science education, but also student achievement.
We've always been accused in the United States of having a curriculum that was a mile wide and an inch deep, and the Board on Science Education with its K-12 frameworks was trying to bring that back in, to take a look at where science overlaps with these cross-cutting concepts, to take a look at these engineering practices, which sometimes people talk about as inquiry, but they're broader than inquiry.
What have Arkansas educators done to create new science standards? Arkansas educators worked with 25 other states to develop the next generation science standards. The Arkansas State Board of Education unanimously voted to endorse the next generation science standards as the basis for the development of the new Arkansas K-12 science standards. When completed, these new science standards will reflect 5 conceptual shifts. According to the conceptual shifts, these standards reflect science as it is practiced and experienced in the real world. They build coherently from kindergarten through grade 12 and focus on deeper understanding as well as application of content. Additionally, these standards integrate core ideas, practices, and cross-cutting concepts and make explicit connections to literacy and math. The development of the next generation science standards was informed by the foundational document, the Framework for K-12 Science Education. Since 2012, professional development has been offered statewide to inform educators of the new vision for science education as detailed in the framework. Based on many years of research on how students learn science best, the framework states that students gain a better understanding of science phenomena when engaged at the nexus of 3 dimensions: science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas.
I got involved with the Next Generation Science Standards primarily at the beginning because of my involvement with the National Science Teachers Association. I was selected to be on the engineering team. We worked with engineers from Boeing, with engineers from NASA, with engineers from Dow Chemical, and we actually spent a lot of time working on the science and engineering practices, making sure that the clarification was there between what science actually was and what engineering actually is, because the language is different. And what you're asking the children to do is very different. Science, you're looking at answering questions, inquiry, doing investigations, whereas with engineering, they're identifying problems, they're identifying the criteria and constraints for those problems, and then they're developing solutions, refining solutions, and coming up with optimization.
But we started with 30 writers, and I worked with the physical science for middle level and high school. The standards are grade banded, which means that groups of grades are put together, and all of the standards for that grade band are together so that the states will be able to take them apart to the grade levels that they feel like their students in their state, they would want them to learn together. And the decision came mainly looking at what would states want. If we grade band it, then that gives the states more leeway in how they might want to break things up.
My involvement with the Next Generation Science Standards was due in part to my work with the National Academies of Science, but I was what they call a critical reviewer. And the critical reviewers were people who looked at the standards as they were being developed, and our comments went into a special place that was separate from the general public comments. We would look at whether the content was appropriate for the grade level, whether we thought that there was too much content to be covered at that point, whether it was too specific. In other words, they drilled down too many levels of complexity and we were working with a grain size much too small, or whether we needed to focus on bigger topics and bigger pictures.
In 2013, the Next Generation Science Standards were published, and a committee of Arkansas educators reviewed and recommended these standards for Arkansas. By 2014, districts and teachers were preparing for the implementation of a new set of science standards. What are Arkansas educators doing now? Arkansas educators are mapping the standards into grades, delivering professional development, and working on new assessments. Groups of Arkansas K-12 educators are mapping the Next Generation Science Standards into middle school grades and high school courses. When completed, the new standards will be called the Arkansas K-12 Science Standards. Professional development continues to focus on what three-dimensional instruction looks like in the classroom. Additionally, New science assessments are being developed. When will the Arkansas K-12 science standards be implemented? These standards are anticipated to be implemented by 2018. In 2016, schools will implement the new standards in grades K through 4. In 2017, grades 5 through 8, and in 2018, high schools will implement new science courses. What can you be doing to prepare for the new science standards? Learn to read the standards.
In order for teachers to be prepared to teach engineering, the first thing that they need to do is to pull that K-12 science framework, get familiar with that terminology. In elementary and in middle school, we recommend integrating as much as possible because there's not enough time to teach everything in isolation.
But I'd also like to encourage teachers to become comfortable with the cross-cutting concepts.
The standards and additional resources can be found at nextgenscience.org. Find professional development. Educators should find professional development at their local educational cooperative or STEM center, study the framework for K-12 science education, and begin to incorporate the science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts in classroom instruction. Stay informed. Educators should check the ADE website for information on the new Arkansas K-12 science standards.
I think this vision is achievable, and I think children are naturally curious. They enjoy science, they enjoy the hands-on aspect, the engineering aspect. You just have to give them the opportunity.
It brings away a new way of thinking for both teachers and students. They're more engaged, they're more active, and they're being able to relate not only science, but engineering as well as the other core content areas.
Science should not just be taught isolated. Science is a part of us, it's a part of nature. We see it every day. So it should be in our classrooms.
And yet I believe that if we hang together and we support each other, we can make this good for us and we can make it good for our students.